Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests and friends, thank you for joining us on this auspicious occasion. Please feel especially welcome and all protocol is observed. Everyone relaxed? Everyone okay? Let's give a round of applause to prove we're human and not AI. Woo! And we're on a university campus, so like a whoop whoop. I think it's totally appropriate. Whoop, whoop! I don't think they've ever done that at a lecture like this. I need to behave myself. But it is a significant moment being with you this afternoon and for the Nelson Mandela Foundation as we celebrate and mark 25 years of existence. Can you believe it? It was born in the early years of South Africa's democracy, and the location of this year's lecture is especially symbolic. And you'll hear a lot of goodbyes, a lot of hellos today as we return to Wits. The Great Hall and Linda Auditorium have been host to this event in the past. But let us begin. I'm going to put my announcing voice on now. Let us begin with a rousing rendition of the national anthem delivered by locally and globally acclaimed the Wits Choir. And I invite you all to stand. Madela reminds us in a letter that he wrote from Robben Island in 1969 that a new world will not be won by those who stand at a distance with their arms folded, but by those who are in the arena, whose garments are torn by storms, and whose bodies are maimed in the course of contest. And if we are to understand his words against the backdrop of a world that we can see every day is a world that's in conflict, it means that we have to dedicate ourselves towards achieving justice, guided by our shared humanity, which is today's theme as well, with the understanding that it will not be an easy effort and that we will have to apply incredible energy. The work of our esteemed and honored Nobel Laureate, Professor Abdulraza Gurnah, who will be introduced to you a little bit later on, provides us with a sensorial, experiential, and intellectual vessel through which to credibly define and to animate the pursuit of our shared humanity. But I wanted to start with probably the most important question of the lecture. Do you like my dress? If you had said no, I wasn't prepared, so thank you so much for being gracious. But it is Heritage Month in South Africa, and I thought it was very appropriate to wear something that connected with that, but also that connected with the theme of this year's annual lecture. So this dress is made in India, in a place in the south of India called Andhra Pradesh. And there's a place there called Visakhapatnam. It's a port town. And thousands of indentured laborers, including my great-great-grandparents, were herded onto these English ships and bound for the cane fields along South Africa's east coast, to a life of hard labor and an uncertain future, to ask and to answer the question, where is home now? Speaking of homecoming, the mortal remains of 42 freedom fighters are this moment being returned to the bosom of their beloved homeland. They breathed their last on foreign soil. They were exiled during the struggle for their definition and their pursuit of home and belonging. But many of us in our country still feel like exiles in the land of our birth, searching for identity, for opportunity, and for inclusion, a genuinely shared humanity. So I wear the raiment of my ancestors, like a costume to be admired a few times a year, while still searching for the house of true belonging, forging my own understanding of where and what home is in a country that deliberately confused that quest through hundreds of years of divide and rule and racially divisive politics. Those divisions penetrated our skins and crept into our minds, where it lives until today. Outside these walls, who is what and who belongs where are warehouses of firewood that burn and spit in the hearth of our collective psyche and anger, causing thick smoke that hurts the eye, that keeps us from reaching to each other and reaching home. Today, we will excavate those confusions and experiences. We will feel them, we will empathize with them, we will confront them, and perhaps we will all release them. Wish us all a fantastic gathering. Are you with me? Okay. So, I think that was okay. We're doing well up until now. So to kick us off beautifully, I want to welcome and introduce the Vice-Chancellor of WITS, Professor Zeblon Vilakazi, to officially welcome you. And through his office, WITS University has graciously agreed to partner with the Nelson Mandela Foundation on this annual lecture. And it's actually special to come back to a venue where Madiba himself was an alumni. By the way, in case you didn't know it, because we can't only go on looks, Professor Vilakazi is not only a celebrated academic, but he's also a nuclear physicist. And just like Madiba, he loves boxing. And I know where my allegiances lie. He loves football. His team is Orlando Pirates. I'll leave it to you to make of that what you will. Prof. Vilakazi.
Thank you, Program Director. The Chair of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Professor Nobel, the CEO of the Foundation, Dr. Buthelezi, our distinguished guest, Nobel Laureate, Professor Abdulraza Gurnah, distinguished guests seated in front here, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, students, and friends. It's an honor and privilege for WITS to welcome you to this year's annual Nelson Mandela Lecture. At his place of formation, the great University of the Witwatersrand. This is a partnership we proudly share with the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Today, as we gather not only to reflect on the life and legacy of Nelson Mandela, but we also celebrate the deep and enduring relationship between this university and the foundation. It's a relationship rooted in history and built on shared values of excellence and service to humanity, which is a theme that forms a cardinal thread, seminal thread in today's deliberations. Nelson Mandela's journey is one that intersects with the history of these great institutions in profound ways. He first walked in the halls of Wits University as a law student in the 1940s. Pretty difficult time for him as well here. It wasn't as easy. Indeed, the odds were heavily stacked against him, and also those who sought education under an oppressive system. However, it was also here at Wits where Mandela sharpened his legal mind and fortified his resolve as an activist, despite the adversity and exclusion he faced. This place, this university, was not a place of learning for Madiba, but a battleground for justice where he made friends, forged allegiances and alliances, and built networks that would later become a backbone of the liberation struggle. It was here, not here, but on the main campus, to be more precise, that Nelson Mandela met key figures like Ruth First, Ahmed Kathrada, Ismail Mie, George Bizos, and thereby forming lifelong alliances. Later, during the Rivonia trial, Lord Joel Joffe, George Bizos, Arthur Charles Carson were among those who defended Madiba and other trialists. These relationships that were rooted here at Wits played a crucial role in the struggle for liberation, highlighting the university's lasting impact on our country's liberation. It is therefore fitting that Mandela Institute at Wits was named in his honor in the law school. The institute was launched to honor his contribution to the transformation of South Africa and continue his legacy through promoting innovative thought leadership that influences African law and the policy for sustainable development. In 1991, Wits University conferred an honored doctorate on Madiba for his commitment to the country and his leadership. This indeed inspired people around the world. And in 1996, he attended a reunion with his law class of the 1940s. Today, friends and colleagues, we remember the life and work of Nelson Mandela. We also take pride in the fact that this university remains a custodian of many of the most significant records of his life. And also it highlights the contributions to freedom of our country and the world. Our archival holdings at the William Cullen Library include over 2,000 items that are related to Nelson Mandela, serving as a critical and invaluable resource and wellspring for scholars, historians, and activists alike. Among these collections, we hold the precious Nelson Mandela papers, which we preserve in trust on behalf of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. They include, among others, the State versus Nelson Mandela 1962 trial records, and the landmark State versus Nelson Mandela and 9 others in the 1963-1964 Rivonia trials, which irrevocably changed the course and trajectory of our nation. We are equally honored, therefore, to house as well the Jürgen Scharenberg photographs of Nelson Mandela, capturing the moments of Madiba's early years, as well as the Helen Joseph papers, which document her extensive correspondence with Madiba during his incarceration, and her selfless role in caring for his family. Additionally, the archive of the South African Institute of Race Relations, SAIRR, includes correspondence between Mandela and the Bantu Welfare Trust, highlighting his engagement in matters of national welfare during the harshest times. I think it was the balances of the time. Bear with me. These archives are not only treasures that remind us of Madiba's relentless fight for freedom, but also serve as sources of inspiration for future generations of scholars and activists and thinkers. They are now digitized, making his legacy accessible to scholars and activists across the world, thereby ensuring that his story continues to inspire action for justice and global equality, not only here, but abroad. Wits University is therefore also privileged to play a part in Madiba's enduring legacy through children. The Nelson Mandela Children's Hospital, which stands proudly on Wits' land, just behind this very Linda auditorium, is a tangible reflection of his love for children and his commitment to their well-being and, indeed, our future well-being. Wits is very proud of the collaborative relationship we have with the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund in relation to this hospital. This is a beacon of hope and compassion and the living testament to Mandela's belief that the future of any society rests in the care and nurturing of his children. Through this institution, the Nelson Mandela Children's Hospital, one of only a handful on the continent, we therefore ensure that we enhance his vision of a world where every child is valued and be given the opportunity to thrive and grow. Today's event, conceptualized and planned by the Nelson Mandela Foundation and the University of the Witwatersrand, is another reflection of our continued commitment to his legacy. It is an event that holds deep significance not just for Wits and the Foundation, but indeed for South Africa, the broader SADC region, and indeed the world. In celebrating Nelson Mandela, we reaffirm our dedication to the values he lived for and fought for, values that continue to be relevant as we navigate the challenges and vicissitudes of our times. We are also privileged this evening to have among us a remarkable son of the soil, son of this continent, Nobel Laureate Dr. Abdulraza Gurnah, who embodies Dr. Gurnah embodies the power of storytelling to confront the complexities of history and the human condition. Having such a distinguished literary voice with us this evening enriches our reflection of Madiba's life, reminding us of the power of words to heal, inspire, and change the world for the better. As we gather here today, let us remember that this is not just an occasion to look back at Madiba's remarkable life, but a moment to draw inspiration from his vision of a just and equitable society. His fight was not just for freedom, but for dignity of all people, and for the right of the and for the right to education, healthcare, and opportunities that enable individuals to realize their full potential. As I draw to a close, we at Wits remain steadfast in our commitment to upholding these values, not just in the memory of Nelson Mandela, but as a living, breathing legacy that continues to shape the work we do, the people we educate, and the society we seek to aspire for. Let us live today with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that the struggle for equality, human dignity, is far from over, but also knowing that, like Madiba, we can be part of the change that brings us closer to the world we aspire and dream for. I thank you. Welcome to Wits.
Thank you so much, Prof. Elakazi, for a reminder and for that call to action. And now for a message from someone who hasn't missed a lecture since we first began in 2003, a formidable woman who inspires us with her energy and her unwavering pursuit of a just society. Put your hands together for this message from Mum Grasa Michelle.
Good afternoon, dear friends. I would have wished to be with you at the 2024 Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture, as I have been for every one of the previous 21 editions. But circumstances this year have made it impossible. I'm with you in spirit, and I'm looking forward to viewing the recording of proceedings. I want to congratulate the Nelson Mandela Foundation as it marks its 25th anniversary at the lecture. The organization supported Madiba fulsomely while he was still with us, and for more than a decade now has continued to do the kind of work he wanted it to do. I'm certain he would be very satisfied with the difficult work it is doing in areas like early childhood development, land reform, and solidarity against genocide in Gaza. And then I know that this is Professor Ndebele's last lecture before he retires as chairperson of the board and takes a well-earned rest. Prof, you have served Madiba's organization faithfully and with great distinction. All of us who care about Madiba's legacy are very grateful to you. And now it gives me a great pleasure to welcome Dr. Naledi Pandor as the new chair of the Board of Trustees. I am sure the foundation will benefit from her vast experience, principled leadership, and passion. Professor Gurnah, I'm sorry that my travels mean that I miss you. Your work inspires so many and always provokes us to think deeply about the challenges of our continent and of the world. Thank you for supporting the Nelson Mandela Foundation and the Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture. I have no doubt that your exploration of this year's theme, realizing our shared humanity, will bring honor to a platform which Madiba inaugurated and valued. More than ever, in a world riven by conflict and oppression, and facing climate crisis and growing imperatives for human migration, the search for social bonding is of critical importance. It is time for solidarity. I thank you.
Hellos and goodbyes. And so again, a formal hello to Dr. Naledi Pandor. It's an honor to have you with us today. Thank you so much. And next, I would like to welcome outgoing chair of the Nelson Mandela Foundation Board, Professor Njabula Ndebele, who has served, in case you didn't know, for a quarter of a century. He's also played the role of chair now for over a decade. And I must acknowledge that he has brought dedicated service and wise counsel to the foundation these many years. And the gravity of this first goodbye is not wasted among those who have worked very closely with Prof. So we must take this opportunity to wish him the very best in the next chapters of their life. I know we often say goodbye to people in retirement and then hope they come back and rope them back into active service. I'm hoping that that's going to be the case as far as you're concerned, so we can continue to tap into your repository of wisdom, but really do appreciate all the contributions that you have made to our society. We all know he's one of South Africa's finest writers and fiercest public intellectuals, and he has been with the foundation since the very start. He was appointed by Madiba in 1999. Prof. Ndebele, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon and welcome to all of you on behalf of the foundation, the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and distinguished guests and friends and ladies and gentlemen who are present at this lecture. And every one of the lectures up to now has been very special. But this one, for me, is laden with both personal and institutional significance. I'm intensely mindful, for instance, of the fact that 2024 marks a quarter of a century since Nelson Mandela founded this organization, at the time simply to be his post-presidential office. In fact, this month of September is the anniversary of the day the organization started working in almost an improvisational mode from what had been Madiba's house in Houghton. Well, we have traveled a long path since those early days, and the world in which the foundation works has changed in so many ways. As you may have heard, I was privileged to be one of the founding trustees and to have worked through the first heady decade of the foundation's existence, with Madiba very, very present and determining our cause in fundamental ways. Since then, we have been through many transitions, as any organization which prizes nimbleness will do. Most notably, when we closed Madiba's personal office in 2010, and then said our goodbyes to him in 2013. Through 2023 and 2024, we have been through often painful processes of deep renewal that went on within the foundation and which have honed our social justice focus, reaffirmed our moral compass, deepened and anchoring in the legacy for which we carry such an intimidating responsibility. I became chair of the foundation's board 12 years ago, having been given the baton so effectively carried by our founding chair, Professor Jakes Gerwel. Watching him in action alongside Madiba did provide me with a peerless demonstration of how he filled that role with a very steady hand and a gifted mind, which could deploy unexpected humor to clarify a complex issue. He was really good at it, and we still talk about him and miss him. And now is the time for my own journey with the foundation to end, as I retire to make for new leadership and embark on the next phase of my life. And so today, in my 22nd and last annual lecture as a trustee of the foundation, I am grateful to so many people for supporting me along the way. The staff of the organization, my fellow trustees, Mrs. Michelle, our many institutional friends and supporters here and around the world in more than 100 countries. My family, especially my wife, who is seated over there. Paul, thank you very much for the years of support. It was wonderful that you were always there as this journey unfolded. The journey includes a memory of the 1 week visit that Mpo and I made upon our to Gurnah. And upon our arrival, we heard Madiba out of sight, coming from an inner passage. "Oh, Njabulo, the professor is here." And just as he appeared at the door to the living room, he continued, "This will be in our newspapers. We never get visitors from professors here." And as you can guess, the pleasure of the prospect of Madiba's newspaper headlines of that visit endures to this day. Before I introduce our distinguished speaker for today, let me share with you 2 matters which speak to organizational continuity. Not too long ago, we shared with the public the news that the foundation had appointed a new Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Bongiseni Buthelezi, who reports for duty on the 1st of October. And you can see he's alert and is waiting to take on. And up to then, Professor Van Harris acted in that role with consummate focus, efficiency, dedication, and commitment. I would like to express the Foundation's, as well as my own, deepest appreciation and gratitude to him for the steady, experienced, and present hand that kept Madiba's Foundation going through calm and stormy weather. Being unavoidably present, he exerted a quiet yet vital presence at the heart of the Foundation's institutional continuity. On behalf of the Foundation, thank you, Van. We cannot thank you enough. Now I'm kind of looking around to see where Van is, but he likes to hide whenever good things are about to be said about him. The Foundation's new board chair is here with us today. I think you will agree with me that she is eminently qualified to take the baton from me and guide the organization into its next future. She's someone who worked closely with Madiba during our first democratic administration in the 1990s, and one of South Africa's longest-serving members of parliament, someone respected around the world for her leadership, her moral courage and wisdom, and always measured voice. Mrs. Naledi Pandor, please. Back to the 22nd Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture. Our theme this year is realizing our shared humanity. It is just 4 years ago that the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, gave the lecture and spoke passionately about a global failure to find a social contract binding humanity together and guiding us through mounting challenges. If anything, today his analysis resonates more than ever. What does it mean when humanity seems unable to find common purpose in the face of the climate crisis? What does it mean when our post-COVID societies experience inequality on a scale never seen before? What is it saying to us that we seem to have normalized war and other forms of conflict to the point where we barely pay attention anymore. We think of Ukraine, of Myanmar, the Sudan, Yemen, Ethiopia, Bangladesh, Somalia, Palestine. What does it mean when a people have been struggling against different forms of imperialism and colonialism for millennia, and now in 2024 are facing genocide, while the democracies of the world either watch on, take measures that are ineffective, or actively aid and even abet atrocity? All these phenomena, of course, result in human migrations. What they show us across the world are responses to migrations, which are all about building higher boundary walls and clinging ever more fiercely to the imagined safety of the nation state. Here in South Africa, what does it mean when a country has enjoyed the freedom of a formal democracy for 30 years, and still most of the people who call that country home experience the lived reality in their daily lives as a semblance of freedom? How is it possible that democratic South Africa is awash with Afrophobia at the same time as its capital formations exploit the wealth of the African countries from which so many of its immigrants originate? Where one has to ask is a shared humanity to be found. Long wrestling with this and many related questions is what led Nelson Mandela Foundation to invite Professor Abdulraza Gurnah to deliver the 22nd Nelson Mandela Annual Lecture. African-born and orientated, eminent novelist and academic, Nobel Prize winner for literature, Professor Gurnah has for many years challenged us with work which is searing in its authenticity and restless and relentless in its examination of colonialism in all its forms and manifestations. Those of us who have read his work and wrestled with his multiple lines of inquiry know that he has much to offer all those involved in endeavor which could be labeled boldly as decolonization. We are truly honored to have him with us today. I'm looking forward, as I'm sure we all are, to Professor Gurnah's lecture with a great sense of anticipation, as are my fellow trustees and the broader Nelson Mandela family. We welcome you warmly, Professor Gurnah, to this platform, and I thank you heartily.
Thank you very much for the welcome, for the introduction. Good evening to you all. It's lovely to be here. Well, I'm deeply grateful to the Mandela Foundation for their invitation to deliver this year's Nelson Mandela Memorial Lecture. It's an honor to address you in a forum such as this, which seeks to memorialize and celebrate the achievements and courage of a great man. His overwhelming achievement is, of course, to lead the struggle of his country to freedom. His courage was evident in the odds he and his comrades and his people had to overcome to sustain that struggle. When the invitation was first extended to me, it came with a suggestion that I speak to the theme, which is the title of this talk, Realizing Our Shared Humanity. It seemed a daunting suggestion at first, as if I might be able to come up with proposals of how we might realize this goal. As I've found out over the last 3 years or so, the award of the Nobel Prize in Literature sometimes means that you're required to be an expert on many things, including predicting the future. I was reassured by the explanation that followed the suggested topic of the lecture, and I will quote a few lines from it. Shared humanity to us is the notion that as human beings we are all one family, and that there should be a deep sense of caring for one another, regardless of differences such as race, religion, and nationality. Having a sense of shared humanity means being committed to championing justice and to demand profound care for the environment and for other species. In an international context, our sense of shared humanity should guide our understanding of justice and inspire us to pursue justice beyond the borders of our respective communities and countries. So that was the paragraph, as it were. So then I took it that I was invited to reflect on our shared humanity rather than to propose its realization, which I was happy and much relieved to do. In preparing for this reflection, I tried to recall my earliest memory of South Africa. That is, when it was that I first heard or knew anything about it. I think it was about 1960, when I was a 12-year-old schoolboy in Zanzibar. For us, this was a time of unprecedented excitement as the politics of decolonization were approaching a climax. It was a year of elections for us, and the surprise of the first election riots. I remember as schoolboys crowding to the classroom windows as men chased each other up and down the street in front of the school, wielding clubs and throwing stones. We didn't know then that this would become a regular and regrettable event for us and for other African nations, when mistrust would make citizens suspicious of their rulers. What we did not know allowed us to feel only the excitement of the approaching end of colonialism. Part of the excitement was also because the politics and the campaign were continental, or indeed global, and names such as Kwame Nkrumah, Abdel Nasser, Nehru, and Marshal Tito, as we called him, became familiar names to us. It was also 1960, as you well know, it was also the year of Sharpeville. It was also the year of Albert Lutuli's Nobel Peace Prize. Both events which made a huge impact on Africans everywhere. In 1961, at independence, Tanganyika adopted Nkosi Sikelele Africa as its national anthem, with words in Kiswahili translation. In a more prosaic way, I came to know about South Africa because the sense of solidarity that arose out of the decolonization activities led to boycotts of South African products. I think actually that was my first awareness of South Africa. We were still some years away from independence at the time, and the administration was fully in British hands. So the boycott was nothing to do with the authorities, was nothing to do with instructions from an African government, but the decision of ordinary people. what did we boycott? I don't know if it made any difference to the South African economy, but suddenly South African orange juice disappeared from store shelves, as did various tinned jams and fruits. In the meantime, though, South Africa had sailed into my vision and remained there since then. In part, this greater awareness of South Africa was also to do with Tanganyika, as it then was, playing host to Southern African liberation movements. And somehow the national project of Tanganyika, for a while, included the struggle of the people these movements represented. I remember well walking past the ANC offices near Mnazi Moja in Dar es Salaam. The offices were established after a 1962 visit by Nelson Mandela and were followed by offices of Frelimo and SWAPO. By then we knew well about the oppression these people toiled under, and their leaders joined the names of the other African heroes we celebrated. I mentioned a while ago that the early 1960s was a period of unprecedented excitement. Or at least so it seemed to people of my generation. And that this excitement was continental or even global. I think decolonization made the world smaller, allowed us to feel a new solidarity. So that war in Algeria, apartheid in South Africa, and the civil rights struggle in the United States seemed also part of us. Photographs of police atrocities during the march in Birmingham, United States in 1963 could just as well have been photographs of apartheid police raids on a South African township. This solidarity I'm speaking of derives in part from a shared experience of oppression under colonialism and racism. And I think it has endured and strengthened in the decades since then. At that time, South Africa and its struggles commanded the sympathy of many millions in the world, but especially in Africa. For many people, that struggle was symbolized not only by the stoicism of its people, but by the endurance of its imprisoned leaders, above all, by Nelson Mandela. For a while in those years in the early 1960s, when some of us were just coming into knowledge of the racist hegemony that was in control of the southern regions of Africa, it did not seem possible that such powerful and mean-spirited domination could end, just as now, when we watch and read about the destruction and deaths in Gaza. It seems impossible to imagine how this injustice will end. Day after day, we watch and hear the atrocities taking place in Gaza, daily, increasingly sophisticated. And many thousands across the world express in what ways they can their disgust and pain at this continuing slaughter. Yet it seems that Israel's leaders are not yet done. In this respect, I applaud the actions of the South African government to take the case of Gaza to the International Court of Justice and to invite even greater condemnation of these tragic events. The court's ruling and its warrants will only be more words in the end. And words will not end this or other injustices, will not rebuild schools or hospitals or end detentions and the destruction of cities. But there are times when words is all we have. words and sympathy, and an understanding of our comparable experiences, our shared humanity. Many years ago, as an undergraduate student, which was many years ago, I read these lines which have stayed with me as a persuasive way of thinking about words. I'm quoting. So here I am in the middle way, having had 20 years trying to learn to use words. And every attempt is a wholly new start and a different kind of failure. Because one has only learned to get the better of words for the thing one no longer has to say, or the way in which one is no longer disposed to say it. The lines, as some of you I'm sure will have recognized, are from East Coker, the second of the 4 quartets which T.S. Eliot wrote during the Second World War. The pessimism that comes through here is not only an expression of the unreliability and duplicity of words, not a loss of faith, but a declaration of the meagerness of an individual writer's offering. This section of the poem ends in this way, and once again I'm quoting. And what there is to conquer by strength and submission has already been discovered. Once or twice or several times by men whom one cannot hope to emulate. But there is no competition. There is only the fight to recover what has been lost and found and lost again and again, and now under conditions that seem unpropitious. But perhaps neither gain nor loss. For us, there is only the trying. The rest is not our business. Eliot was in the throes of returning to Christianity at this point, and the humility he gently advocates in these lines is informed by his religious beliefs. What also comes through, though, is an understanding of literature as a vital and continuous human activity. And if he is inclined to privilege the longevity of this activity and to associate it with a certain tradition and hierarchy, those men whom one cannot hope to emulate, it is not because he rejects newness and experimentation. Both his writing elsewhere and his argument here demonstrate a desire to rediscover or to reinstate what he considers important in literature. It is not that words have no force, but that the writer has to approach his or her engagement with them in some care and even an expectation of failure, and with an awareness of what has been written before. It was words that made it possible for me to have any real inkling of a South African. It was in the late 1960s, as I mentioned before, that I first read the work of the many brilliant South African writers of that period. Peter Abraham's Mine Boy was a revelation in my teens, and there were so many others that came later and afterwards became part of my work and my life. Words is also my profession, and it's what has brought me here. Although it is perhaps not completely the case to say that words is my profession, because words are largely a means of articulating our reflections, are not an end in themselves. That articulation is what I mean by literature, an activity which is both the story and something beyond the story. So now I will speak briefly about that and its importance in our lives. What is important about literature? Let me say to begin with that the person who asks what is the point of literature is not going to be satisfied with whatever answer you give him or her. That person has not considered how vital story, song, and dance are, and have always been, to the very existence of a human community. Not as ornaments or distraction, but as the acts that enable empathy and solidarity and self-recognition in a coeval atmosphere. First of all, literature gives us pleasure, a profound pleasure, which is not about making us smile or lighter of heart, but a pleasure which engages us and broadens our minds. If we do not feel this pleasure in reading a book, or listening to an oration, we stop and put the book away, or we switch off and stop listening. Secondly, literature brings us news. It tells us about matters we did not know, or from a perspective we had not considered before. That is what I had in mind when I mentioned a moment ago that it was words that gave me an inkling of South African realities. When I say news, I do not simply mean facts and information, but something that forces an engagement to the point of anguish. A text that always comes to mind for me in this respect is Alexander Solzhenitsyn, One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. Even if you had known something about the labor camps and the prison system in the Soviet Union, this text forces you into a deep and felt awareness of the brutal assault on the human spirit that incarceration in the Gulag meant. When you learn that the prisoners are marched out of the labor camp to the day's worksite in temperatures of minus 48 degrees centigrade, imagination almost fails because such knowledge is beyond your experience. Yet you learn that people endure even against such ordeals. The literature also tells us about what we do know. It reassures us that our understanding of the world is shared, that how we feel is also felt by others. In other words, it reassures us about our humanity. I mentioned a while ago the great excitement of the decolonizing years of the 1960s, and since then many nations have gained their freedom from overbearing European power. Not everything has turned out well, and what we have come to understand is that the consequences of colonialism are still with us. European colonialism in Africa and elsewhere did not come in only one form, and its consequences are various, both historically and in the contemporary world. Most colonial activity in Africa was brutal and extractive, with predictable results in economic and political instability. Its legacy continues today in the impossible civil societies that are post-colonial nations, with their divisions and oppositions, and the widespread deprivation that often results in warfare and irresolvable contention. Since no one is willing to give up an inch of territory, or can only do so in bad faith and violence, Sudan, Somalia, Ethiopia, DRC, to name current crises, there is no option but to continue in hope that patience and resolution will enable a better future. Every age believes that it lives in tumultuous times. And our age is troubled by political uncertainties and environmental danger. I started by referring to the words of the brief the Mandela Foundation presented to me as part of their invitation to give this address, realizing our shared humanity. I will end with these following wise words, which were also part of that brief. I quote, "We live in a world in which global politics is a major issue in our lives and will continue to be as we grow ever more connected to each other. Not only does what happens beyond the borders of our respective countries affect us in economic, social, and even emotional ways, but international dynamics are also evolving as the global order is being reimagined and reorganized. Thank you very much.
Somebody who's so proficient with words express them, isn't it? I have written, but I dare not call myself a writer in front of this. There is such a beauty as aspiring writers and for those who have written to hear someone like Prof. Gurnah speak. There's an alchemy in the way their words are strung together. And that alchemy can represent healing, can represent passion, it can represent love and romance. And that's what I hold on to. Because through the excellent pairing of words, we locate our realities. We understand them better and you think, oh, why couldn't I think of that? It's because you're not a writer. Sorry. And there's a sentence, I think, from one of the writings which says, and there's an exchange between the two protagonists. I have nothing, he said. Nor do I, said she. Let's have nothing together. And it just felt particularly delicious to me. I don't know about you. But let's move on then to the discussion phase. And our discussant this year is the incoming chief executive of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, whose tenure, as we've heard, starts on the 1st of October. And amongst many of his accolades, Dr. Mbongiseni Buthelezi holds a PhD in English and Comparative Literature from Columbia University. And his academic background and scholarship serves to make him, I think, the ideal moderator for this conversation. He has studied the work of Gurnah as a student, and he has shown over the last 6 years in organizational spaces how to turn deep action, or thinking rather, how to turn deep thinking into action with measurable impact. Because we can have words and no impact. This is what we hope to achieve. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Well, I could mime the discussion, but we don't want that. So we'll have some mics brought out.
Excellent.
Thank you, Iman. Thank you, Professor Gurnah, for coming out to Johannesburg to start with from the UK to help us honor Madiba and continue the tradition that he established by delivering this year's lecture. Before I continue, I just want to also tell Professor Vilakazi that I'm an Kaiser Chiefs supporter. And so this conversation and rivalry will continue for many years. I want to thank Professor Gurnah also for a stimulating and thought-provoking lecture. It's been particularly thought-provoking to hear your thoughts about solidarity and the work that words can do as wars rage in Gaza, in Ukraine, in the DRC, in Somalia, and in other places. I'm tempted to say thank you for coming to Johannesburg from both the UK and Zanzibar, both of which are places that you write very evocatively and very poignantly about in your novels and other writings. And earlier this week you spoke about how you belong to both places. You never leave a place who can belong to more places than one, which is something I want to come to in our conversation. I'm especially pleased, of course, that we have an esteemed writer delivering this year's lecture for two reasons. The first is that we are bidding farewell, of course, to Professor Njabulo Ndebele, another esteemed writer, as he retires from chairing the Foundation's Board of Trustees after 25 years of service, as we've heard. But secondly, I've been an admirer of your writing since I studied Paradise as a student in Professor Johan Jacob's class in Durban 21 years ago. It's been a deep pleasure for me to read another 7 of your novels. And I'd like us to explore a little further in the time that we have some of the provocations that you've offered in your lecture, but also that you offer in your novels as well. I'm not going to ask you to predict the future, but I'm going to come close to it. So let me start with the first question I'd like to ask. It's a privilege, of course, in a country like South Africa to be reflecting in this moment and to be thinking with the experiences of countries like Zanzibar, like Tanzania, that attained liberation long before us, that also, as you've talked about in your lecture, supported the South African struggle against apartheid. You've indicated, and you write really sharply about how many of those countries, Zanzibar in particular, and other countries on the east coast of Africa, have come to grief, which you reflected on in the lecture. You talked about 1960 in Zanzibar, getting to know a little bit about South Africa. And I want to quote this line from your lecture. You say, "What we did not know allowed us to feel only the excitement of the approaching end of colonialism." When the end of colonialism suggested so much expectation of prosperity, which then subsequently turned to nightmare, or to a nightmare of desperation and despair, that sends people, characters in your novels, for example, like in The Memory of Departure, fleeing to a country like England. It is something I think worth reflecting with in South Africa that we're in today, where we are in that phase, where the promise of liberation, the dream of 1994, in some ways is turning or has turned to bitter disappointment and even to rage. And so I want to ask you, what do you think we can learn from the experiences of Zanzibar and other countries that you've talked about, and the mistakes that have been made that we should not repeat in a country like South Africa?
Thank you. Thank you for the introductory words, and thank you for promising that you would not be asking me to predict the future, but then you ask me anyway. I don't really know. Well, first of all, it's important to... First of all, I think it's important to remember and to always remind ourselves about the specificities of the circumstances of different countries. So what has gone wrong in Nigeria, say, is not the same thing that has gone wrong, let's say, in Sudan, even though they're right next to each other, let alone further away. It's important, not only because it's better to know than not to know, despite our conversation last night, it's better to know than not to know, but also then we get it wrong if we don't keep in mind the specifics, as it were. We're not going to be able to come up with a general solution. But nonetheless, we can learn. South Africa can, which is your question. I'm not about to lecture South Africa on how to do it, but South Africa can learn on those other events that have preceded, because there's so many things formerly colonized countries have in common. But as I mentioned in my lecture, colonialism comes in different forms, and also historically comes at different times, its consequences are different. In a way, you might say that the issues that are central to what's happening here since 1994 in particular are specific to South Africa, and therefore the answers have to come from those specific circumstances. Anyway, having said there are some things to learn, sure, but the real solutions will have to come from what people know of their circumstances. Can I just return to Zanzibar for a moment? I can see you're getting your next question ready there. So that what happened in Zanzibar was something which was still quite new, 1964. So some of the worst events that then befell Africa in the 1960s had not yet happened. You know, so Idi Amin was not in sight yet, for example. And all the kind of endless coups across the formerly French colonies in West Africa were just beginning. They hadn't quite become, you know, one a month, as it were, as they eventually started to come. So it was still early stages, and in a way, it was even more shocking what happened there, because it seemed so much a betrayal, a treachery against those aspirations of independence.
And you've actually begun to answer the next question that I wanted to go to. You've said in the lecture that decolonization made the world a smaller place. And you've talked about how you became aware of South Africa in Zanzibar. But I think, I mean, the reflection also on how the South African struggle was supported by the government and by you and other people as people. I mean, it's interesting that if we're reflecting now from 60 years later, what has become of the fate of the solidarity that you've talked about. You've said it is endured and strengthened in the decades since then. Yeah. I'd like to ask you to just reflect on what is the nature of that endurance? What has made it endure?
Yeah, okay. So there was undoubtedly something rather naive about that idea of solidarity. The war in Algeria, as I mentioned, other events like the civil rights movement and so on, that, including apartheid, that these were our battles as well. There was something naive about this because, again, it was not taking account of the details. So for quite a lot of those people in the United States, for example, the goings-on in our part of the world were probably ridiculous. They weren't interested in us. So that wouldn't count as solidarity, really. But what has endured is, how to put it, a solidarity which continues not at that state level, but at the level of people's understanding of the circumstances in the world. So I'm trying to avoid proletarian, but shall we say something like that ordinary people as well know what's going on in other parts of the world and share. In the same way as we take the example currently of Gaza, say. I was just not so long ago in Dar es Salaam, and we see not only posters or whatever, people constantly talking about what's going on in Gaza. And I'm pretty sure people in Argentina or Brazil will also be doing that. So it's that kind of solidarity of not governments, but of relatively well-informed, ordinary people who now feel that this is one world, as it were. Recently we've heard this phrase, Global South, being used, mainly by academics, but as often happens, words that start in the academy, like post-colonial being one, words that start in the academy find their way into the way people speak normally, because it makes sense. And I think, in a way, this too makes sense. So when we say Global South, we don't mean only Africa, we mean perhaps Asia, South America, etc. People who are most likely formerly colonized people, and who recognize that there is some kind of common cause or common experience up to a certain point, anyway.
I'm curious to think that if we think about solidarity in the way that you are describing it, formerly colonized people, if we think of what happens when there are failures of solidarity, or when there are solidarities that are about creating and perpetuating the pain that we are seeing, there's something else happening. There are other forms of solidarity. In your novels, I'm thinking here of Pilgrim's Way, I'm thinking of Admiring Silence. There's a way in which that failure of solidarity, it becomes very strongly felt lived experience. When the failure of solidarity among people who've immigrated because the countries that they come from have imploded, they face really cruel treatment as immigrants in those countries. So I want us to just reflect a little bit on that inverse, when solidarity fails, when solidarity is about inflicting pain.
Yeah, I'm quite sure too that what we started talking about, the failure, it's not too strong a word, I don't think, the failure of many African nations also produced a solidarity. That is to say, the common experience of failure, deprivation, atrocity, authoritarianism. People recognize this in others' experiences too, not only as immigrants, although that in a way is a kind of bringing people together in a different way because of the, being strangers in a place that is not particularly welcoming, or worse, but in any case, not welcoming. So even in pain, as you say, or perhaps in pain, there is also a kind of recognition, and that's where the solidarity I'm thinking of. I'm not thinking of solidarity as forming a new movement that is going to transform, origin or places where those people come from. But it's a way of having a greater understanding and shared experience, particularly of, I suppose, of deprivation. Deprivation not only, I'm not thinking only economically, but I'm thinking also deprivation of rights, deprivation of self-fulfillment. Because if you're not able to speak properly, then you are not able to fulfill yourself. You can't say what your aspirations are. You daren't, because they may not be what's required. Or indeed you cannot truthfully offer an opinion on whatever might be going on. The other day, you and I were talking, and I was saying sometimes you think when South Africans, I think when South Africans speak about how everything's going to pot in their country, they forget that in their country they can say this.
That is actually my next question, that things can be said.
I've read his notes.
That things can be said, but here I want to come back to what you said about words and what words can do. And again, thinking from this moment, from this place where xenophobia, for example, rears its ugly head again and again, where, as we've spoken about, there are bombs raining down on Beirut as we sit here. There are bombs raining down on Gaza as we sit here. Words can do something, have a power. But are words enough, is the question I want to ask. And I'm asking that question because if you say words are sometimes all we have, are we then resigned to the atrocities that we're seeing happening, the violence that we're seeing happening, the loss of life, the loss of home, repeating itself again and again in human history? I said I wasn't going to ask you to predict the future, but I am asking you to.
Yeah, when I say words are all we have, because we know, for example, since we're talking about Gaza, we know that the continuation of this brutality, that there are ways of, if not stopping it, then putting some kind of a brake on it. And that lies in the power of one nation, which is the one that is supplying the bombs. We don't have the ability, I don't anyway, unless you know a way, we don't have the ability to say to that nation, stop doing that, and for them to listen. They do whatever it is they want for their own reasons. But, so in that sense, in that situation, all we have is words. And those words are to say, this is wrong. But, so it's not to say that we are resigned to anything in that respect. But there is nothing that will, we don't have the power, as it were. I mean power only in a sense of we don't have the, whatever it is, the ability to make the really important difference. Not yet anyway, not in this situation. There may be other situations where you might say, well, do something about this. Let's do something about this. But it's not easy to, you can't sit on a platform and say to people, go there out there and risk your life. Get shot, because that's what you should be doing. If you want to do that, do it. But I don't think this kind of platform speak, to say action is what is needed, is always possible or even right. You have to be absolutely certain that what you're saying is that this is worth you getting killed for. Go there and get killed if necessary. If you are in that situation, as people of course are and have been in this country, in other countries, then they do take those risks. But there are many situations where even that might not do the job. You can name many situations where people have tried to protest. In Kenya recently, young people protesting against some economic changes, and the police shot dozens of them. They don't fool around, these guys. They don't say, you know very well here. They don't say, oh, all right, listen, we'll go and think about it. No, they shoot until people are scared enough and go away. So then words is all we have in those situations.
So I want to follow that up with thinking about how words endure, that the words that have been said a long time ago, written a long time ago, endure and still can do something much later than they were written. And I'm thinking here of course, your use of T.S. Eliot. You talked about Peter Abrams and how you've read his and other South Africans' words a long time ago, and they became part of your career. So that endurance of words, what do you think it offers us? When we are in a moment like this, in a moment of crisis, as you've said, all is words, we have is words sometimes. Why does it matter that the words of others who've talked about injustice, who've talked about brutality in the past, are words that are available to us?
Well, what we have, as I tried to suggest there, this is one of the reasons literature endures, both because it speaks to us about things that are going on now, in a way, because we reflect and compare and understand metaphors and so on, but it also tells us about what happened at other times. And so we understand that endeavor for justice or for self-expression or whatever is a human necessity. It's not just something unique that's only happening in this moment in Johannesburg. It makes us understand. They endure because they keep telling us again and again, maybe we should know, but we don't know. Maybe we should learn, but we don't learn. So we keep having to repeat what has been said again and again and again. And we have to continue doing that because it's the only way in which you keep the idea of truthfulness alive.
So as we move towards the end of this conversation, I want us to, for a moment, I want to ask that words that were composed a long time ago should be just played. We were meant to do this much earlier in our conversation, but I think this is the appropriate time.
Let's have it now.
So there are some words that I'm just going to ask to be played briefly. The Tanzanian national anthem.
That was 1961. You copied us.
So I'd like us to I would like to invite you to end off by reflecting on this national anthem and reflecting on this question of solidarity and shared humanity and these words that have traveled across time.
Yeah, well, sure. That's one very good example of the, I guess, the optimism of the time. It wasn't only what the opening lines. I mean, that's a literal translation. Literally, I mean, it's exactly the translation of the original, but in Kiswahili. So, Mungu ibariki Africa, God bless Africa. And it wasn't only Tanzania. Several other countries also adopted that as their national anthem. So that's an example of a certain optimistic desire for solidarity. I have to say that although I mentioned that Nelson Mandela visited Dar es Salaam during that period when he was on the run, and as a result, the ANC were allowed to open an office in Dar es Salaam, and they were also offered training camps in more than one site in Tanzania. But after about a couple of years, and this is where solidarity begins to weaken, after about a couple of years, there was a suspicion, a rumor, which the government took seriously, that these ANC cadre were planning to overthrow the government. And they were asked to leave. End of solidarity.
So with that, so this I think also brings us to that realization that solidarity can be curtailed. And so I want, just as a last word, how do we keep solidarity alive in instances where, as you've said, certain words are difficult to say, certain actions cannot be called for? How then do we keep solidarity alive towards realizing our shared humanity?
Well, I mean, I don't know if there is a simple way, but the one way, which is rather laborious but can also be pleasurable, is by talking, by speaking, by writing and reading. Can I also say, there was one thing I meant to say, but somehow it slipped my mind. When I was writing the part of this, of the lecture, where I'm talking about words, and it's just after the section when I quote T.S. Eliot and so on, and it was like mid-afternoon, and usually if I'm working like that, around about 3 o'clock or so, usually I stop and I think I'm just going to read something for a while. So I picked up a collection of short stories that I was reading, and I was going to read this because this seemed rather funny to me, rather interesting, because what I read, this story that I read this sentence: "So powerful are words and pictures that even their makers often believe in them." I don't know. The person who wrote this is right over there, Jabulo. And it was funny because I had just been writing about words, and I wasn't particularly, the collection was not his stories, there was various other people's stories, but in my progress through this, I'd come to his story at that point, and I read this, and I thought, he's around somewhere.
Thank you very much. I think I want to be one of those people who believe the words that you have written, that Professor Nobel has written, and others, that we can achieve solidarity, we can keep solidarity alive towards achieving a shared humanity. With that, Iman, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Buthelezi, I believe you acquitted yourself rather well. Thank you so much. And also just to say, I mean, I told you I'm from India, right? So I didn't expect Prof to bring the spice. He did. So thank you so much. That was a delicious and enlightening conversation. Really do appreciate it. So I'll almost reaching towards the end now. 2 final pieces on our official program. And I used to see this guy, this white-haired guy, on my way to work every morning when I worked at Power. And, you know, it wasn't breaking a sweat. And then one day I asked Vern Harris, where are you walking from? Did you know, who lives in Joburg? Everybody, presumably? So Melville to Houghton it's not close. He does this walk every single morning to and from the office. Well, now he can stop because I'm going to introduce him now. He is the outgoing CEO, and he tells me that he's going to have to kind of change his walking patterns. He does say he's going to intensify. My friend Dean is in the audience, also an avid walker. Maybe you two should link up. But quite a formidable man, and somebody who's played a role, I think for a long time, almost in the background in a way. I've interviewed Vern over the years, and it's been a delight connecting with him. But he was Madiba's archivist for the years between 2004 and 2013. And he directed the Foundation's archives for many years. And it connects to what Professor Vilakazi was saying about the need to digitize this archive so that it lives on into perpetuity. And we can have access to this wisdom when we need it most. And we need it all the time, of course. He's also an adjunct professor. He has authored and co-authored several books. He's got honorary degrees from the University of Cordoba in Argentina, as well as the University of Pretoria. And he's really held the reins of the Foundation over the last 18 months in the capacity of acting Chief Executive, and he'll be stepping away at the end of this month, as you've just heard from his position. His contribution to the Foundation has been immense, so I want to welcome Vern. And a final word on the anthem. They say imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Thanks, Iman. I think her introduction will be longer than what I'm going to say. But thank you for being here with us and supporting the Foundation. Thank you for prioritizing us over Chiefs, Sundowns, and the Springboks. I can tell you the halftime score: Chiefs 1, Sundowns 2. But seriously, I'm trusting that you feel the same way I do. Prof. Gurnah has given us a medley of really fecund lines of inquiry. And not only today, but he has given us his time through the week, 2 other events and numerous conversations. Very grateful. For me, Razak, just to say what lingers is this question of belonging. And I take away with me 2 really important questions. They're personal questions, but I think they're questions for all of us in relation to belonging. The first one is with the clarity that the earth belongs to no one. How do we begin to find a way, all of us, to belong to the earth? And the second question, that quintessential South African question, with that clarity that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. How do we begin, we who live in South Africa now, wherever we were born, wherever we come from, how do we begin to work out how we belong to South Africa? And I'm hoping that our conversations will continue, and your partner, your life partner, Denise, we've had those conversations as well, really appreciated them. I'm hoping we can keep talking about these issues, which are so fundamental to the human project. Because I think those questions of belonging apply not only to South Africa in a specific context, but if we think of the countries you've been naming, Sudan, Palestine, These are absolutely central. But now I have to thank many institutional partners, and it gives me a lot of pleasure to do so. Mum Michelle, you know, she couldn't be with us today, but she's always there for us. And Mbongeseni and I were with her last week, and she reminded us that she'll always be the mother of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Wits, thank you for hosting. Zeblon, you and your team have been great to work with. Sponsors, I think you've been seeing a list of sponsors, but just to name, Reckitt, you've been our anchor sponsor. Thanks very much indeed. And then Vodacom, Brand SA, Sunday Times, Vision Tactical, who've been giving us security services free of charge for some years now. And then Mahindra. Thank you. I'm hoping you will also agree with me that Iman has been a fantastic program. Thank you to our trustees and all the NMF staff. You've been a fantastic team to work with. Thank you. And then I want to name 4 people who, for me, are really great leaders, 2 of whom are here today. They lead 4 organizations which carry the name Nelson Mandela: the Children's Fund, Linda, the Mandela Rhodes Foundation, Judy, the Nelson Mandela Institute at the University of Fort Hare, Kim, and the Nelson Mandela University, Sibongile. They steward these organizations which carry Madiba's name with such care. And you've supported me and the NMF through rough times. Thank you for being there for us. And then lastly, just on a personal note, Prof. Ndebele, we've had a close working relationship for over 20 years, but especially in the last 18 months, we've worked side by side, and I appreciate it enormously. I know we also share this, is that we're counting down to our retirements, and Prof, I'm glad to tell you that both of us have 3 days to go. And then 2 other people who are counting down, my life partner, Kerry. I can't even see where you are now. And my son, Ben. They're waiting for me to start a normal life again. Look, I'm going to do my best, but I'm wrestling with that question, which is perhaps an archetypal human question. Where do I belong now? Thanks very much. Cheers.
I promise I don't say this every time, but you have been the best audience I've ever been in front of in my whole life. Thank you so much, and it's been such an honor and a privilege doing this now. I have personally, well, I haven't, curated this body of beautiful and exceptional work that we're about to enjoy now. So if you like, who likes a cappella? Who likes jazz? We brought them together for you. So I want to give you the soil all the way from Soweto. Enough said.
Tile, 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 Tanzania, asante sana Tanzania, asante sana Tanzania, asante sana Tanzania, Tanzania, asante sana 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 Tanzania, 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 asante, asante, Asante sana Celebrate humanity, and when you love, love unconditionally. Better world begins with a smile. Go out there and give it a try. Celebrate humanity, and when you love, love unconditionally. Better world begins with a smile. Go out there and give it a try. Peace, love, happiness is what we need. Peace, love, happiness is what we need. Peace, love, and happiness is what we need. Peace, love, happiness. I pray that as soon as you hear the song, you feel a wave of love, and that you reach out to spread love like a soaring dove. Yeah, the pure love that comes from above. Without peace, love, and happiness, we won't survive. May the good Lord continue to bless you and those around you. Know that He loves you. Yeah, that's why we say. We will never be apart if we find it in our hearts to celebrate humanity. And when you love, love unconditionally. Better world begins with a smile. Go out there and give it a try. Celebrate humanity. And when you love, love unconditionally. Better world begins with a smile. Go out there and give it a try.
Calling all the nations and everyone in different places. Stand up and make some changes for a better human nation.
Show compassion, lend a hand. It might not be easy, but I know you can. Divided we fall, but together we all stand. Love thy neighbor, treat him like a brother. Heal now and go be especially for Chani. Mama now and go buyasi when I won't say. Masibamba neni, singeta neni, masitanda neni, because we are one. Zimbabwe, we are one. Tanzania, we are one. South Africa, we are one. We are one. We are one. Yeah, as a people, we are one. Yeah, together we are one. Yeah, together we are one. We are one. Yeah. Oh, oh, yo, yo, yo. Oh, yo.
Good afternoon, everyone. With those two songs, we're just simply saying all protocol observed. And also, thank you so much to our hostess for curating such an amazing bit of entertainment. She promises that next year, same time, same place, different outfits, but same group. So you are welcome. Yeah. We are the soil, come all the way from heaven, but locally based in Soweto. Unfortunately, this next song will be our last song. But I know all good things find yet another home in some space and time. So we will be seeing you guys very soon. I don't know where. I'm not promising, but it will happen. Siyabulela, Xama kuntoza good.
I've got joy in my heart, and you know it's the kind of feeling followed by such a healing. Yeah. I've got joy in my heart, got love in my heart. I've got joy in my heart. Yeah. It's the kind of feeling followed by such a healing. Yeah. I've got joy in my heart, got love in my heart. Yeah, you're probably sitting there on your own, you're probably listening to the song, pumping over your radio, and suddenly you feel a lot of joy, joy. You're singing along, the song comes in, you don't care, just carry on. Probably sitting there on your own, probably listening to the song, it's pumping all over your radio, and suddenly you feel a lot of joy. Uthixo wakudala wena wandizala ngobuhle bendalo wandithi ndiyabulela mampinga wena usisithando sam akukho ndimthandayo njengawe mama ndiyabulela mampinga usisithando sam. I'm saying this because we're family. I know it, I know it, I know it. We're family. I've got my mother, my brother, my sister, and Laureate. I know it, I know it, I know it. We're family. I know it. We're family. We're family. Oh, I feel it deep inside. We're family.
Tivuke namhlexeni
Tivuke namhlexeni
Ilanga bethebsweni
Ilanga bethebsweni
Yamana hecaweni
Yamana hecaweni
Siyadabulela
Tivuke namhlexeni Namhlexeni Ilanga bethebsweni Yamana hecaweni
Ayithathanda sume siyadabulela
Ta-la-la, ta-la-li-la-li-la, ta-la-la, ta-la-li-la-li-la, yeah. Ta-la-la, ta-la-li-la-la, 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 ta-la-la, la-li-la-la, ta-la-la, ta-la-li-la-li-la, yeah. Ta-la-la, ta-la-li-la-la, ta-la-li-la. I've got joy in my heart.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.